It was New Year's Eve, and the streets were glowing with fireworks, music, and joy as people hugged, laughed, and made wishes for the year ahead. But down a quiet alley near Times Square, where the lights dimmed and the celebrations didn't reach, a little girl sat on a piece of cardboard clutching her knees to her chest, while snowflakes melted in her hair. She was no older than 8, wearing a thin jacket, 2 mismatched socks, and eyes that looked too old for her face. And it was in that moment, among the noise and cheer, that a man named Eli noticed her. Eli was just a street artist, with nothing but a few wrinkled bills in his pocket and a heart heavy with loneliness. But when he saw her face shadowed by fear and abandonment, something stirred deep inside him, something that couldn't be ignored. He stopped and looked down the alley, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him, until she looked up at him with eyes that seemed to plead without words. He walked closer, slowly, not to scare her, and asked if she was lost. But she didn't respond. Instead, she looked away, pulling her sleeves over her trembling hands. Eli sat down a few feet away, not pushing or prying, but simply sharing the silence that weighed between them until finally, after what felt like an eternity, she whispered her name was Lila, and that her mom had told her to sit there and wait while she went to get help. But that was 6 hours ago, and she hadn't come back since her voice cracked, and she tried to hide it behind her sleeve. But Eli had heard that sound before the sound of someone trying not to cry in public. He reached into his bag and offered her a peanut butter sandwich, one of the few things he had saved for the night, and she hesitated before taking it with shaking hands. Eating like she hadn't tea in days, Eli knew he could not leave her there, not tonight, not ever. As midnight neared, and the city erupted in cheers and countdowns, Eli wrapped his only scarf around Lila's shoulders and told her that they were going to watch the fireworks together from the top of his rooftop spot, which he called the best seat in the city. She looked at him unsure at first, but then nodded slowly as if placing trust in him was her only choice. They walked together through the slushy sidewalks, people brushing past them, without noticing 2 forgotten souls in a city that never sleeps. When they finally reached the rooftop, Eli took off his coat, placed it around her, and let her sit on the blanket he always kept there for stargazing, and as the sky lit up with dazzling colors, her eyes widened for the first time with something like wonder. Eli didn't say much, just watched her and smiled, because in that moment, watching her, forget the cold, forget the waiting, forget the fear. He felt something shift inside his chest. After the show ended, Lila leaned against him and asked in a tiny voice if he thought her mom was ever coming back, and Eli didn't know what to say, because deep down he feared the truth. So he looked up at the stars and told her sometimes people get lost too, lost to come back, but it doesn't mean we stop looking for them. Her fingers curled into his sleeve, and he knew she was holding on to more than just warmth. She was holding on to him, and as they climbed down the fire escape, she asked if he could stay with her for the night because she was scared and tired and didn't want to be alone. Eli took her hand and told her yes, they could stick together for a while, not knowing how long that while would turn into, but already feeling like it was going to be longer than he ever imagined. That night they stayed in his tiny basement room with walls covered in paintings and dreams. Lila fell asleep on his mattress wrapped in his only blanket, and Eli sat beside her watching her breathe steady and safe for the first time, in who knows how long. And though he told himself he was just helping her for the night, just making sure she was safe until the system could take care of her, a voice deep inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had saved him too. And as he looked at the little girl asleep under the dim light, he whispered, "Good night, Lila," and promised silently that she would never be left alone again. Morning came with gray skies and the sound of city buses screeching below, and for the first time in years, Eli felt like waking up had a reason. Lila stretched beside him, blinking at the unfamiliar room, but when she saw him still there, her face relaxed. She asked if he would still be with her if her mom never came, and he didn't answer with words, just made her eggs from the few groceries. He had and told her they had a big day ahead, filled with adventure and discovery. They went to the local shelter where he introduced her as his niece. Hoping the lie would buy them some time, the volunteers handed her a warm coat and some boots, and Lila smiled brighter than he had seen yet, and he realized her smile had started to feel like sunrise in a life that had only known dusk. They spent the next few days together drawing, painting, walking through frozen parks, and sharing stories about their dreams. Lila wanted to be a singer. Eli wanted to have an art gallery, and both wanted a place they could call home, and every night he would tuck her in on the mattress, and every morning she would wake him up by humming old tunes she remembered from the radio. Then came the day when social services arrived. Someone had spotted them and called, and the woman who came was kind but firm, asking Eli questions. He wasn't ready to answer, asking Lila if she had family and where she came from, and watching as the little girl clung to Eli's side, like he was the only anchor she had left in the world. That night, as they sat in the art room with brushes in hand, Lila looked at him and said softly, "I know you didn't ask for this, and I know I was just there that night, but I love you, and I feel like you were the only real thing that has ever happened to me." Eli felt the floor shift beneath him, because those words weren't odd in any deal he made with himself. They weren't part of the plan he had carved out for surviving alone, and yet they felt like the final piece in a puzzle he never knew he was building. He told her that love wasn't about deals or planning. It was about finding someone who sees you when no one else does and choosing to stay, even when you don't have to. And when she smiled back at him, he knew there was no going back. The next morning, Eli showed up at the courthouse with everything he had. Every painting he ever made, every reference from soup kitchen shelters, even street artists he had helped along the way, and stood before the judge to request guardianship, not because he had money or a house or a perfect life, but because he had something Lila never had before, someone who wouldn't leave, someone who would fight for her. Someone who already did. The courtroom was silent as the judge looked at the paperwork, and then at the little girl who had stopped drawing and stood up holding Eli's hand tightly. The judge asked Lila what she wanted, and she said simply, "I want to stay with him because he's my home." Weeks passed, and papers were signed, and the system finally allowed what both their hearts already knew. Lila stayed with Eli not as a guest or a temporary project, but as family. They painted their new apartment with colors they chose together: yellow for hope, blue for peace, and a splash of red for courage. And as winter turned to spring, Eli watched Lila blossom into a girl who sang loudly, laughed freely, and danced barefoot on the rug while he painted the background. Of their new life, they never stopped being different, never stopped being poor in the eyes of the world, but inside their little corner of the city, they were rich in the only thing that mattered: love. And every New Year's Eve, they went back to that rooftop, not to remember the pain, but to celebrate the night when a stranger saw a little girl and chose to change her life forever, because sometimes miracles don't come wrapped in glitter. They come wrapped in scarves painted in silence and whispered in the quietest "I love you."